Well, welcome back to Show Me the Money Rugby League TV. This is a very special Championship League One review and preview as the Championship and League One heads towards the business end of the season and those exciting end of season playoffs. We'll start with the Championship. We'll start with the big game of the weekend, which was obviously fourth Halifax Panthers against third in the table, the Batley Bulldogs. I watched this game. I wasn't at the Share yesterday, Jimmy, because I was still recovering with what happened at Odsel and the intruder, the trauma of having an intruder inside my box. We're keeping it clean. We're keeping it clean. So yes, we've had the intruder inside the commentary box. And yeah, you know, I got the distinct feeling Batley didn't really give the great account of themselves. I know Halifax, obviously, they knew the importance of it, and, you know, Simon Griggs, you know, who I speak to on the rare occasion these days, you know, talks about those processes, and obviously he was happy with how Halifax set their stall out, those early tries, you know, suffocating Batley. I just got the distinct feeling, Jimmy, it was, when you talk about doubling up, Batley were trebling up after the summer bash, and I just got the feeling it was just too big of a game too soon after the games against Dewsbury and then Sheffield on the Wednesday. I think if Batley go into that game with the 7-day rest, similar to what Halifax have had after their game against Bradford, and I'm not saying that's the deciding factor. Listen, I watched that game and I thought Joe Keys, Lewis Jouffre controlled that, and very, very good, very clever. The kicking game caused Batley no end of problems, but ultimately I just thought it come down to a game too far against, in my opinion, better opposition, better opponents.
I'd agree with you, and it looked like that, but it was interesting to hear Lingard at the end, wasn't it? Because he said he just dismissed that, and he said it's easy to say that.
No, I agree.
And he said it was simple, that he clearly didn't think that they were physically in the change room before the game really struggling. One of the pundits was saying perhaps they just started a bit too slow with it in the mind that they needed to conserve their energy. But I think probably as much as anything, a bit of home advantage. You know, maybe a couple of percent that Batley were more fatigued from, you know, a tough trip to Sheffield straight after the bash. But also you've got to remember as well, I think it was near enough for a reverse score when it was at Batley earlier in the year, wasn't it? But it was the same, but a couple of tries in it. That pitch at Batley know how to manage that pitch really well. So it were no surprise, and I think most people would have expected what happened last night. I don't think there were too many, but I didn't see Halifax winning by a couple of scores, maybe 3, and at the most 4, depending on how Batley held it together late on. So no surprises for me. For me, Halifax are the best outside them top 2, and York and Batley are nibbling at their ankles, and you know, on the day, I believe anyone can beat anybody out including Feather when we're not at full strength. So, now fair play to Fax. I think Griggs speaks really well after the game. He clearly trying to keep them on, not get carried away with themselves. And yeah, bring on the playoffs. I think it's going to be so exciting. Both of those teams are going to be involved. Both deserve to be involved. Batley, the big overachievers with Barrow this year. Sheffield probably in that category as well, considering they were second favourites to get relegated at the start.
No, I'd agree with that.
We know
Sheffield.
We know they're not going to make the playoffs this time round. So, yeah, Halifax on paper at the start of the year, we all had them finishing third.
I certainly did.
Maybe Craig, I think Craig probably picked York to finish up there, but yeah, they're doing exactly what expected. The cream is rising with that deeper squad and handling injuries more. Joe Keys, class season, a few players, Woodburn Hall's been standout as well, I think, and yeah, let's see if Batley can just keep fighting and maybe cause one more upset in the playoffs.
Well, they've got a big game, Batley at home against Barrow this weekend, and you know, you look at the table, and obviously Widnes will go on to their game against Featherstone shortly. You know, they just fell short against Brian McDermott's Featherstone Rovers. You know, looking at the Championship, realistically, I know you can say the only teams that Sheffield, Widnes and Bradford can catch are York and Barrow, but ultimately you're now in this situation where Barrow just need a win, York need a win. It's over. The championship playoff race is over.
I think so. It'll
be
where
Lee,
they finish, isn't it?
Featherstone, and then you're going to have a bit of a. You're going to have a very bit of a slight movement, I think, between an Halifax, a Batley, and a York. And I said this on the commentary yesterday. Bradford still have to play Halifax, York and Batley. I think the pressure's off at Bradford now. You might see a different Bradford. Bradford, similar to like you said, with Warrington on the full 80 minutes, having to play Leeds, Castleford, those teams above them. I still think Bradford, funnily enough and strangely enough, they've certainly got it in them to beat the York and Halifax or Batley on the day, certainly depending on what happens with the loan market and players potentially coming from Leeds to ease the halfback crisis at the club. But yeah, for me, the championship top six of Lee, Featherstone, Halifax, Batley, York and Barrow is done and dusted.
They're just jostling for places, aren't they? And the only one thing I wanted to add about that game was Dave Manning. He just continues to just perform superbly, doesn't he? I think Lingard mentioned him in the post-match comments. He was well happy. But he knows it wasn't their best day. But he was super.
And we've mentioned like Luke Cooley going to Leeds. I'm hearing Tom Gilmore's off to Widnes. Michael Ward's off to Widnes. I'm hearing quite a lot of Batley players, are potentially going to be leaving the club. Craig Lingard, it's almost effectively, this will be his first sort of real challenge at Batley because, when I spoke to Craig pre-season, he spoke quite open and honest about there's been minimal change. We've kept and managed to hold everything together. Kevin Nichols has been very complimentary with the playing budget. But I think this is going to be the first real off-season at Batley since probably John Keir's time where you are going to see wholesale change at the Batley Bulldogs with a number of key players leaving and obviously those players needing to be replaced.
Yeah, 100%. I think me and Jim said it on our show last week. It shows the importance of probably keeping together your team year on year, which happens, as you know, very little in Championship, does it? Just the squad turnover is part and parcel of playing Championship rugby. You'll end up at one club or the other most years. Let's see how Craig's done a fantastic job the last couple of years, and he's fantastic. All credit to him. But let's see how good he is at the recruitment side. That he's probably not had to quote unquote smash out the park yet. This is his time to show no, I'm not only a great coach, I can get this side of it right as well, and hopefully fair play to him. I hope he does.
Just quickly on that game, there was the red card. I know we've spoken about it in the show. Just quickly your thoughts on it. Obviously direct contact to the head, even though it was a palm as Craig Lingard was trying to defend to the referee on the touchline there. Like you say, if it's just one palm, I'm not defending Johnny Campbell. I'm just saying, Jimmy, my own personal interpretation of the rules from the RFL is if it was just a palm and that's it, and he goes down, I think you're not going to see a red, potentially a yellow. But the fact it was a repeated.
Yeah, and my opinion is...
Which comes across as intent. I know Johnny Campbell is not that type.
No, and I'm sure he's not. And everyone, that period of a game, when the game was gone and that frustration... But yeah, ultimately, I'm all about the intent of a player. If someone knocks someone's head off, but they're slipping and the player who they're tackling slipping, that's part and parcel of the game. They might deserve 10 minutes, but there's no intent. I thought there was frustration. Bang, you can hurt someone with a palm of your hand. Just watch any Bruce Lee movie. And I think there was enough intent there. And I'm sure Campbell would probably hold his hand up and go, yeah, to be honest, I'd lost my head a bit. And I did it one too many times. And there was intent to the head. As we touched on in the show, referees in the game have got to really make a stand with things like that. And a year ago, is it a red? No. 2 years ago, is it a penalty? Probably. 5 years ago, is it a penalty? Probably not. Yeah. So, yeah.
For all the deep MMA fans out there, if they've ever watched Pancreas from about 90, in the late 1990s, Baz Rutten knocked many of people out because you could only use your palm of your hands in Pancreas. So that was how it famously come about. So if people are saying it's not that harmful, I'll disagree.
It's as bad as a
if they know how. I wouldn't say as bad, but it's definitely can definitely cause a lot of damage, a lot more damage than I think some that you can probably admit to.
We'll move on to Widnes against Featherstone. I've not seen the game. I've only managed to read the reports, but no surprise to see Widnes regenerated, revitalised, rejuvenated under John Keir. they've had an amazing run the last couple of weeks, and you know, for them to, I think about 6 weeks ago, prior to John's arrival, we were saying they were in the doldrums, they're in the mess, they're potentially in that relegation battle. Since then, you know, John's gone there. I know they've lost the last 2 against Barrow and obviously against Featherstone, but 2 narrow defeats there, and obviously on the back of that, they've had strong performances. You know, they've quite firmly now dragged themselves out of that sort of bottom 4, and I can't stress this enough, you know, even though the playoffs are done, there's now like a mini playoff between Sheffield, Widnes and Bradford to see who can finish 7th, 8th and 9th. And let me tell you, I can't stress enough, you're probably looking at 20 grand in central distribution between each of those spots. Yeah. And for Bradford, you know, that could be 60 grand they miss out on. For Widnes, that could be 60 grand they miss out. For Sheffield, 60 grand, you know, similar to Bradford, when you've not got a wealthy benefactor who's going to sign an open checkbook or put the money in, let me tell you, 60 grand to Bradford or Sheffield next year, you're probably saying that's free, you know, quality, straight on the cap, championship players. So how Sheffield, Widnes and Bradford finish is going to be interesting, because they can't make the playoffs. It's going to be all about, do they get the 60 grand, do they get the 40 grand, or do they get the 20 grand? And obviously, for Bradford and Sheffield, we know Widnes are obviously getting a bit of money and investment for next year with some of the signings that they've signed. You know, people might be watching this and thinking, well, really, you know, 20, 30, 40, 60 grand, is that going to play much of a difference? Well, let me tell you, Mark Aston, Mark Dunning, you know, it will make a massive difference in terms of recruitment and retention and abilities to perform on the field next year. But Widnes, under John Keir, listen, I think Widnes, you know, they've underachieved this year. Simon Finnegan obviously left. John Keir's come in. Yes, the style of rugby, we know what John's all about. You know, he's wanting to get his team in there. We know some of the players that he signed. We're hearing Tom Gilmore potentially going there, Michael Ward, Ant Walker at Bradford. You know, he clearly wants Widnes to be up there next year, challenging in that top 6, potentially top 4, and whoever the money man is at Widnes who's putting the money in, you know, fair play. You know, we reckon, Jimmy, they could be spending between 400 and $500,000 next year based on what they're signing. You know, and that is going to put more pressure on a Batley, on a Halifax, on a York, and even more pressure on a Sheffield or a Bradford to try and get in them playoff places. Because we know the structure's staying the same next year. We know it's staying the same. We just don't know what the mechanism's going to be, how we get from 23 into 24. Whether or not there's going to be, you've got to be in the top 8 to get into the Super League 2. Yeah. Whether or not there's going to be positions on the field and also licensing coming in. As we've discussed, Jimmy, numerous times, I spoke to a championship owner last week, I'll repeat it again. He told me he's not putting so much money in the first team, he's making sure that academy is gold standard, because that will be weighted on the licensing criteria what IMG come out with.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I think the one, we've had a chat on with Joe, is championship clubs are torn. Some clubs have gone early in recruitment. I mean, Halifax have done a couple of years now and spent you know a significant amount. Widnes and Keighley probably started the ball rolling this year, with Keighley backing themselves to get up. And we've said you can try and spend 400 grand and $500,000, but ultimately it's how wisely you spend the money. It doesn't guarantee it. Look what Batley have done. Yes, it's nice to have it. Can you secure a player like Tom Gilmore, for example? You know, he's probably been the best halfback in the competition this year.
Yeah, he's been in the team of the year for the last 3 seasons.
And I'm sure he'll be in this year. I mean, obviously, Joe Keys and Anthony Thackeray stand out to me as well.
Yeah.
But regardless, you know, that's the difference. Could Widnes have got him last year? He's a local lad, but they didn't. He stayed there. Luke Hooley stayed there. Kept the band together. So yeah, having that money can be the difference between perhaps being able to offer that little bit more and tempt one of these key championship players to your club. But it doesn't guarantee anything. The only thing that guarantees something is what Lee have done, you know, and still, there's always that chance. So, yeah, it's good to see. I think it'll make the competition, this is how I view this year. I've enjoyed the Championship massively. I've enjoyed watching the games. I've enjoyed this tussle we've got going on for the playoffs. The relegation battle's been hard to watch because I find it quite sad what's happening at Workington. But from the week 6 onwards, when Lee started to make the moves, it's been pretty pointless in terms of we know what's going to happen.
Correct.
Barring a minor miracle, we've known for a long time now, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, Lee will be going up. So that's hard for the teams who are fighting for these playoff places, because ultimately, what are you really fighting for? I'd like to think that next year there's more chance that it will remain competitive for longer, and in most leagues you have 1 or 2 who are a little bit above, but I'd like to think next year it's the strength of the competition. I think will never have been stronger. I think it'll be the most competitive and highest standard in terms of calibre of player than we've ever seen. And especially if we find out it's about getting into that top 7, how heavily weighted is finishing position going to be compared to previous success, compared to attendances, compared to does the club have an academy? Because if it becomes apparent it's very important, the clubs that I've spent early will be wiping a few beads of sweat off the brow because they're like, thank God we did it when we did. Others that have sat back a little bit more comfy might be thinking, let's see who can we find last minute, who's not getting a game in Super League, and maybe strengthen the team at a later date, rely on loans. Will Luke Hooley and Liam Tyndall play 20 games each for Bradford next year if they're both Rhinos players? It's never as simple as who you sign.
I agree, and I get what Craig's saying about Liam Tyndall going potentially to a Wakefield if they're still in the Super League, or even potentially a Salford or Ulkinston Rovers, but I just can't see a club in the Championship, maybe Castleford to a lesser extent, but I still feel, like you said, Joe, Liam Tyndall, does he want to do the Jack Broadbent, come down and be a top 25 Championship player and have a season on loan at Bradford with no recall option, where he is a Bradford player for 23, or do you want to try and be a squad player at one of those Super League clubs?
Yeah, it's a big question a lot of players are going to have to answer, because there is a lot of players on, I think, every single Super League team that are quote-unquote squad players, and it's probably the year more than anything with the reserve, and I don't want to repeat myself, but with the reserves not meaning much in terms of transfers and what coaches are thinking on signing players, they might think, I don't want to be a squad player here, I want to play week in, week out and show how good I am and guarantee yourself the contract for the year after. It depends which way you want to go about it.
How far away would you say Halifax, York and Featherstone are? Because what we are seeing with Featherstone
in terms of catching Featherstone and...
No, if we're going to say Lee are going up, we're talking the playoffs here, because at the minute everybody's got this sort of, this sort of idea that it is going to be Lee versus Featherstone. Yeah. I'm not so sure based on what's happened at Featherstone in recent weeks.
I think it's Lee's to lose. I think it sounds fun to say the rest are catching up. But
I think he means more.
No, I'm saying Lee.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
I can't wait for the final game of the season because it's Halifax versus Featherstone at the Share.
I still think Feather a standard above. Yeah, standard above. I think it's more that Fev probably hitting home a bit, that then have to be not a minor miracle, but it's going to be a big upset if they beat Lee, where at the start of the season they thought they're ahead of Lee, and obviously with Derek signings and the way it's happened throughout the season, Lee are now the top, so it's probably a bit of going, well, we'll just wait till the £1 million game and let's give it a roll on that one. Yeah. I think that's, which could be dangerous, because then you're not hitting it with form and all the other stuff we talk about. But if you're going in there, if the players are going in there mid-season knowing it's one game that really matters, I think they're just saving themselves for that £1 million game, and we'll just give it all for that.
And go back 6 weeks when we were, Lee was starting, if not longer, to Edgeway, and I said I'd seen a Featherstone player at a Keighley game, and he said we don't care how many times we lose to him as long as we beat him in a big one. We've discussed that to the death. But to answer your question, how far, they tried to make a big thing of it on Premier Sports last night. Are you guys actually going to going to be the ones who end up playing
late.
The only thing I'd question is Featherstone's ability to get their strongest team on the pitch. If Fev had their strongest team on the pitch, or even the 1 or 2 shot, I think they beat Batley, Halifax, York, 4 times out of 5. I'd have them as really heavy favourites. But they're struggling to get a team out. And there might be reasons behind that we're not aware of. Maybe they didn't play Leilua at the weekend because it's that 4G pitch. And are they just protecting the players until they play the games that count? I suppose a good way of answering it is, if Feb don't get that first team back out, I think there's arguably more chance of an upset before the final than in the final itself.
Wow. Workington obviously went to Odsal yesterday. Sad afternoon for Workington. One win all season. No away win in 18 months now. Chris Foreman, he's tried his best. He's worked with you, Joe, and I believe you, Jimmy, to try and get players up there, to try and turn it around. I don't think Workington realised just how tough the championship was going to be this time around, with so many Super League players dropping down and clubs utilising the loan, the dual reg. You know what? I'll be honest, for 60 minutes, I thought Workington were the better team yesterday. Bradford...
as many as 60 minutes?
60 minutes. Really? It was only the last 20 minutes, Jimmy, when Bradford got a stranglehold and just went on a crazy point-scoring spree. And I don't want to be critical of Mark Dunning and the Bradford Bulls, but what I am going to say, Jimmy and Joe, is that performance yesterday, this smacks of the Bradford Bulls season, absolutely bloody frustrating and inconsistent. You've got a second half performance where you're posting 42 points and you're throwing the ball around, your crossfield kicks are coming off, Joe Burton's fending off Oscar Thomas and he's going on a lovely diagonal run. You're actually seeing the team when they want to play and play with no pressure and everything's coming off. It's so bloody frustrating because 60 minutes up to that point, scrappy, sloppy, errors, competing at 40%, and that's the frustrating thing for the Bradford supporting public and obviously Mark Dunning, is how do you instill consistency into those performances? Because ultimately it's that inconsistency, and you know what, John Keir always used to say it was always side above self. I'm watching the player body language more now, and there's something clearly wrong behind the scenes. I'm seeing arguments amongst players. I didn't see it so much yesterday, but I'm seeing players, I won't mention names because it's not fair, but I see players get substituted, interchanged off. They're arguing with the coach, why am I coming off? Fans are saying, why are you coming off? Players are going, I don't know, what the hell's going on? Players are then sat on their own. It is a very fractured and fragmented Bradford Bulls squad. And like I said last week, I think you're going to see about 16 go. A lot of players coming in. I think that needs to happen. Clearly, something
needs a reset, don't they? They need a reset, and I think that's
something's gone wrong. Something's gone wrong behind the scenes.
And they've got a new coach, haven't they? They've got a new coach. They've got a new way of playing. Mark plays a very different brand of rugby that John does, so that never helps, does it? As you see in Warrington this year, it never helps when you've got one style and a completely other. You don't have your players, you don't have your squad, you don't have the pre-season practice of putting the players in the system and in their players' minds to effectively get it right. And I think, as you said, 16 players gone, and obviously we know a few that will join, a few that are leaving. I think that's what's going to happen, and hopefully next year they press the reset button and they bring in a fresh new crop, new legs, new hungry players that want to play for the legendary Bradford, as you love, Mick, and let's get it on. But I will say one thing about Workington is, I know you said for the first 60 minutes, like, I've watched a lot of Workington this year, and that's every game. Their league, not the league position, because they probably are at the position where they will get demoted, but their win numbers probably is not a fair reflection on where they're actually at as a team. I've watched them loads, and I've said in attack they can bring some brilliant rugby to the forefront of your screen, and they put on plays, and they probably got to work. I think defence has been a big issue for them all season, but you know what, they've had some brilliant performances, Workington, and I wish they'd pulled off 1 or 2 more wins, and they got them
more points, didn't
they? They've been brilliant. They've had some brilliant things. Chris is a lovely guy. I've not got a bad word to say about Chris, and it's just unfortunate how it's all played out. But
and I've said it since the start of the year, I feel for him, because the nature of that Championship 1 player
against Doncaster,
yeah, and it meant that they could only start the recruitment very late on. And it's already very hard to get players from the M62 corridor to get up to Workington. So they were up against it before a ball was kicked. And before, the lads have gone through, and Chris and all the staff have gone through some, really tough times over the last couple of weeks. And they've all, nearly all of them have stuck together, and they've gone down fighting, and they'll fight. They've not finished yet. I'm sure they'll fight till the last ball's kicked, and they'll do themselves proud. And I don't know how many of their fans were there, but they certainly, you got to feel for them. It's a shame when you see any team go, and I just feel that they were already behind the black ball before a ball was kicked, and it's no surprise, but it's sad to see.
A club on the up in the Championship, Jimmy, London Broncos, what on earth has gone on there? Because really inconsistent at the start of the season. Obviously, they've changed the coach, Jamel Coleman, obviously Wayne. Listen, Mike Eccles, I've got a lot of respect for Mike Eccles. I get asked all the questions all the time. Was he the academy youth coach with a strength and conditioning background? I'm like, yes. You've seen what's happened with Bradford and Mark Dunning. I'm not sure what's going on yet. I might actually try and call David after this show and just say, well, look, you've got to Newcastle and you've won by 44 points to 0. I mean, Sitovani Morsadurki, someone actually said to me the other day, if you were, it was a Championship coach, you've seen a lot of London, Mick, as we have, which players would you look at? Because obviously the out of contract list for the Championship players is doing the rounds, and there's a lot of London players on that list. And I was like, Sitovani Morsadurki, I'm like, going through it all and just having a sort of informal chat. But listen, I think London, they need to sort down their coach's position. For mine, Mike Eccles has done enough. Again,
but I just, like I said to you the other week, I grew up with Mike and Lee. I know him quite well. It might have changed, but he wasn't going thinking, I finally got my chance. He's a strength and conditioner who can clearly coach, can clearly motivate the players, and can clearly get the players performing after a tough year. He's done a brilliant job of that. Does he want to do it longer? Does he want to focus on his strength and conditioning? And that's what he's done at every level and loves it. I'm sure the owners will be asking him, do you fancy it? And whether he says yes or no, but it's just nice again to see a team turn it around.
And it would have been a travesty if London had gone through the trapdoor.
And there's two names you've missed out there, Mick, that I'd say, in my opinion, that have been miles more influential. The City has got some flashing attack, but the ones I think Dean Pratt has been absolutely unbelievable this year. I think him or Lewis Bierneck, I believe, are the two players of the season at London. That I
don't think they were on that out of contract list.
That's what. Because you picked Bierneck the other week as a standout player, but
I was on about the out of contract list.
It just meant who's out of contract, I think.
I thought Bierneck, isn't he? I believe.
I don't know.
He wasn't on the list that I was sent, unless he's. Well, you should know.
It's on board. We'll have a look at that after.
Yeah.
Craig will know.
Craig will know if he's going. He might have re-signed. I hope he has re-signed because Lewis Bierneck, in the games against Bradford, he's been a talisman. He's really carried that pack.
But great to see it, and then we can just basically reverse that conversation for the last 2 weeks at Newcastle. They've got to be so.
They must be sick of. Yeah, it's been a terrible season for Newcastle. It sounds a bit harsh. It's been terrible for Newcastle.
Well, we know from what Craig has said, Seymour's put a hold on the recruitment now for next year because nobody at this moment in time knows what's happening.
Yeah, and that's no slight on Dennis. He's doing everything he can. Yeah. And like we said about Workington, Newcastle have the same boundaries and the same hurdles to get over.
Yeah.
And just because they've got a bigger budget, it doesn't mean it's an easy job, because you've still got to get the right players who are willing to uproot and move 2 hours, 3 hours up the road, and obviously maybe that news that everything's on ice for players have reacted and it's affected their preparation for the game, because I'm not having that there's anybody in Rugby League who predicted that score.
I think you're right, Jimmy.
Maybe a close game and London winning a close game, but not a destruction.
We can only be honest on this show. Everybody was told it's looking like 2-10s. Everybody has planned for 210s. Halifax this year, we know, have obviously put more into the recruitment. We know a number of clubs have done the same and put money into the recruitment, expecting you'd have to finish in a certain position in the table to potentially be in what is going to be around the corner, which would be a Super League 1, a Super League 2, 2 divisions of 10. Obviously, we're very close to the action, Jimmy. We're hearing that might not be the case. We're hearing that it might be going down the licensing route. Obviously, IMG are in a very difficult position because they're working to this 12th of September deadline, which is only next month now.
Yeah.
It's only next month. You know, they're still holding these weekly meetings with the clubs. I know a lot of championship owners are frustrated. They only had the one meeting. They're doing a lot of talk with the Super League clubs. Rightly or wrongly, I wanted to put this point across to Craig on the show. A couple of people saying, should an Oldham, should a Swinton, should a Keighley, should a Rochdale, should even a Bradford or a Batley or a York have a vote on this, and should that vote hold as much sway as a St Helens, a Warrington, a Wigan or a Castleford? It's a very sort of open, ethical debate, but ultimately the clubs are still going to have to vote on this proposal when it lands on September the 12th. You know, how is Rugby League going to look? Because it's a 12-year partnership with IMG. Change is probably not going to be sweeping change overnight. You know, I suspect there might be a gradual sort of
That's what they've said,
change.
haven't they, now? I think we were expecting a very big decision, but it's... Oh, sorry, I'm not allowed to. They've said a big... I've hit the tail, so it threw me off. They've said a big change is going to happen. We've all said a big change, but then it's sounding like everyone on the ground saying, no, it's going to be slow.
But I think there needs to be a big change.
Well, I agree with you.
There has to be a big change.
But they're saying it's going to be slow, which obviously, as we think, that might be a mistake.
There's not enough money, and this is factually correct. I know League One clubs, I won't name the League One club owner, he says we're only getting £21,000 central funding. His business made £180,000 profit last year. He's more than happy to cover the cost of that £21,000. But there's not enough money in the sport to sustain the clubs that we currently have. It's how... Well, we can do, but you're not going to see the current competition structure is a mess, basically. It's how you get away from the loop fixtures in the Super League. You know, for instance, this weekend, it's Hull FC versus St Helens again, Wakefield versus Wigan. Again, they only played each other the other week, you know.
I think Leeds have got to go to Catalans again.
Again, exactly.
And
this is why Sky... And Channel 4 to a lesser extent, because Channel 4 don't pay anything, you know, they cover the production costs, and obviously the Super League take a hit on that, but they then gain it through national television exposure. The problem is they're not getting the value for money, and obviously the TV contract is up at the end of next year, and obviously IMG are obviously involved in those discussions. And speaking to the broadcasters, well, what do you want? Nobody wants the loop fixtures. No. So there's still a scenario, Jimmy, where we might end up with the 210s. It's how it all comes about. But like I say, it's not going to help recruitment. Newcastle have put a hold on it. We know Bradford obviously signed 3 players. They're getting announced this coming week. That was from Mark Dunning yesterday. We know Halifax have got a couple of external players coming in. Whether or not they get announced imminently, we don't know. But again... You know, there's a situation here where September the 12th is going to come along. You know, the clubs desperately need to know. And, you know, I would not want to be IMG, because if you're telling me, Jimmy, they're still conducting this sort of market research in the background by speaking to the clubs, the coaches, the key stakeholders, well, time is of the essence here. Like you say, everybody's putting the recruitment on hold now because they do not know if it's going to go to licensing. They do not know if we're going to go to 210s, or we don't know if it's going to be a mixture of a remodel, restructure with a bit of on the field and licensing attached.
Yeah. And I'm not sure it's not perhaps not quite dramatic as they're all putting it on hold. I think a lot of clubs are pretty much done. I think what it means is that some clubs who've invested heavily early might now be thinking, was that wise?
Yeah.
And ultimately, though, if you think of a little things, if your team's performing well, your attendances at Bradford, if your team have a totally different season, your attendances could be quadruple, even fivefold what you've been getting recently. That's where you bring the money in as well, isn't it?
Correct.
So you'll pay for a signing with a good year sometimes, and there's lots of factors. I think some clubs have been more tentative than others. And sometimes you know what it's like. If a player becomes available, if for whatever reason he doesn't want to, retention gets done first. If a club says, you know what, we'd love to keep you, but we can't for this reason or that, and that club becomes available, you're either in or out, aren't you? Some clubs will have to get involved earlier than they might otherwise want to, for fear of missing out on a potential elite championship level player. So, but yeah, as always for us, helping with the players and helping with the recruitment, we like the early deals. We like to get it done, so it's less stress on the lads. It's less stress on the lads' family. We try and help them with that, and help the clubs try and get it done, so everyone can enjoy a bit of an holiday and not be scraping around at the end with panic and worry everywhere.
Well, like I say, on this show, the minute the clubs get something, not 9 times out of 10, the phone calls, probably to you guys as well as me, will come through and say, look, Mick, this is what they're proposing. So hopefully we get a little bit more clarity on what's going to happen before September the 12th. On to League One, Jimmy. Great to see Doncaster have 4 figures there. Swinton, Keighley, 4 figures. Cornwall, North Wales Crusaders, 4 figures. Brilliant. Good to see League One. And, it pains me when certain people at Super League level, they're like, oh, let's do away with that, that bottom division. Listen, look, there's clubs there that are trying. I weren't at any of the games, but let me tell you, Doncaster 26, Rochdale 20, Swinton 22, Keighley 26. That tells me
both late comebacks.
Yeah, both late comebacks.
Swinton were 20 points 2 up, I think, at half time. 20 points to 8 up at half time.
Yeah. I said it on the radio when I was going through it. I thought, hang on a second, is this Keighley's first defeat of the season? They've gone to Swinton, Harewood Road. Yeah. They've waited to ambush them. Great for Keighley and Reece Lovegrove. Yeah. Another Dane Chisholm-inspired performance. They're pretty much home and hose now. I think it's this weekend's game against Hunslet. Win that, and I do believe they're going up.
Statistically, yeah.
Statistically.
And Swinton, they had a great win last week. They're quite a few bodies down. 8 of their first 17 couldn't play in that game. So it just shows, like I said, and I believe since the start, Keighley got the edge, but when it comes to the best of the rest, and if it could happen in the playoffs, but I think Swinton are starting to show that they are probably overall the second strongest side and squad in the division. But Doncaster, North Wales, Rochdale, on a good day, can they beat them in a one-off game? Of course we can.
Who's going up, Mick? You love your calls. You made me make some calls.
Yeah, okay. I'll be brutally honest. For League One, Keighley are up automatically. Because obviously North Wales...
Who's winning the playoffs?
Because there's 11 teams, North Wales don't play this weekend, so Keighley will beat Hunslet. They will go up automatically. You're then left with North Wales, Swinton, Doncaster, Rochdale and Hunslet.
Yeah.
Oldham have left it a little too late to try and get in the playoffs, so you're left with Hunslet, Rochdale, Doncaster, Swinton, North Wales. Okay, only 1 of 5 can go up. Hunslet, killers there. 2 inconsistent for mine. They got beat 24-0 by Midland Hurricanes last Friday night. I didn't see their game this weekend. In fact, I don't even think they played this weekend because it was their weekend off. So obviously, again, a little bit too inconsistent for mine from what I've seen. But on the day, Hunslet, as we saw earlier on in the season, they went really close with Keighley, and I think it was a late Keighley try in the 78th minute that actually got Keighley home at the South Leeds Stadium. So on the day, they can play and raise the game. This too inconsistent for mine. That leaves you then with Rochdale further up. Again, they've had a lot of disciplinary issues. I know Matt Callan's obviously gone, and Gary Thornton, a good friend of mine's there. He's got a really, really tough job there because you're coming towards the business end of the season. You've got injuries, you've got players suspended. Obviously, we know they brought in a lot of loans from Warrington this week, I believe it was.
And 2 from York.
2 from York. Yeah. So they're clearly short of bodies. By and large, when I was looking at that score coming through yesterday at the Keepmoor, I thought, well done, Gary.
Absolutely.
And it was only a late try that got Doncaster home in another fantastic game from League One. Rochdale on the day,
Rangy.
They can beat anyone. So I'm not going to discount Rochdale, but I don't think it's going to be Rochdale. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Gary. I'm sorry, Andy Mazer. I just feel what you've inherited or what Gary's inherited so late in the season is probably going to be little too late to try and change. That leaves you then with Doncaster, Swinton, North Wales. Any one of those three, based on what I've seen, can do it. Yeah. As you've said, Swinton coming right at the good end of the season. That defeat yesterday, albeit a painful defeat, that at least shows Swinton the standards that they need to be. Doncaster on this amazing run, an amazing run at the start of the season. They were inconsistent, hit and miss, but, do not discount that form and that momentum going into the playoffs. And, of course, North Wales Crusaders, just 3 defeats all season. I know those come pretty bang, bang, bang. I'm not sure why those defeats happened. I weren't aware of injuries or suspensions. But, again, nobody wants to go to Colwyn Bay in those playoffs. I'll tell you what, Jimmy, I'm going to call it now, because I know I've got some good friends at North Wales Crusaders, but I'm going to stick with the team that's got momentum. I'm going to say it. Doncaster will go up. They'll go up, they'll reach the promised land. I'm not saying that because Kyle Hall's a good friend of mine and a friend of the show, but I think they've got that momentum, and there just seems to be a different little bit of a mindset with Doncaster all of a sudden, and it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, they've got Midland Hurricanes this weekend, a tough game away. They should navigate that one. I mean, I weren't at the Midland Hurricanes Oldham game yesterday, but Jesus, 39-0, and you're clinging on with a penalty to win 41-36. Crazy game.
Crazy game. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say Doncaster.
Okay.
I'm going to say it'll be Doncaster, Swinton in the final, and it'll be Doncaster who get it done.
Wow.
Unlike they could do last year against Workington.
Yeah, that's the call in it at the moment. Like you said, North Wales have been dropping down. I think North Wales, if I'm correct, are all pay as you play, match payments only.
Yeah. They're a good. Listen.
That's a amazing job. So fair play to North Wales for even getting in second place. Whether they get their big call is if they do get promoted, sorting out their team and their finance. Because one thing's for sure, they can't do that in champ, can they? They can't go as pay as you play in champ, so they'll have to start figuring out some contracts in that regard, which will be a bit different for them. Swinton obviously been good all season, really. Swinton, Doncaster flying at the moment. Like you said, Rochdale probably on the opposite way down, has had some brilliant wins, brilliant performances, but they're on the way. And Hunslet, I'm not going to write off Killer at Hunslet, it might be a big call to make, but he's said to me there's a lot of injuries at Hunslet.
No, they've done it tough, yeah.
They've got a lot of injuries, they've had some bad things earlier on in the season, but they're just, I think he's happy they're starting to, the results might have not been quite right, but he thinks they've got the things in place there to actually make a run at it, so they might just be off. So for that reason, I'm going to go with you, Mick, and go Doncaster. I think it's finally their year. I think it's finally their year.
Two for Doncaster.
Yeah.
Jimmy's already said Swinton.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lower you go down, we talk about injuries, don't we?
Yeah.
Like, I remember my brother's probably smarter than me, and we've been rugby fans all our lives. And a few years ago, when I was saying I fancy these for league nailed, and he went, "Doesn't matter. It's all about injuries." And as the years go by, I'm starting to think it is the most important factor in our sport. The lower you go down the leagues, the more of a factor it becomes, because the depth in squad is just not quite there. What Doncaster have done recently, and I've got two lads who I help with there who have been missing out as a result of it, they've gone on an incredible run of not suffering from injuries. Rochdale have got an incredible run of suffering with injuries and ill discipline.
Correct.
You've then got Hunslet struggling with injuries. Swinton, 8 out this week.
Yeah.
Can Donny maintain this for another 8 weeks to get through the playoffs? Where they don't, if they do, they've got as good a chance as anyone. Statistically,
says it's not going to happen.
They might, it'd be unbelievable if they do, and you can make a case for all of them, and I think we've said for weeks, haven't we, Joe? Off the thing, it's probably the playoffs in League One could be the most exciting thing left in rugby in this country, certainly for how even they are. But I think Swinton have got the best squad out of those
to deal
teams,
with that pressure.
And I think they've shown this week by taking Keithley right to the wire that even without all their first teamers, I'm going to stick with them. I'm going to stick with them as best of the rest. where will the game be played? Will it be whoever comes second get home advantage?
So I don't know where all this £1 million games at Headingley. No, it'll be at Lee Sports Village. It'll be at, if North Wales get there, it'll be at North Wales. It'll be at the highest place finish.
Yeah. So Swinton, let's say Swinton comes second, and they will and win their first game. It's the same as last year.
Yeah.
So the higher you come,
so like
the more
Workington, it would have done part.
Yeah, because
Listen, I'm hoping North Wales stays second, and it's North Wales done it. I love a trip to
Colwyn Bay. Yeah.
Oh, love that. Part of the world.
I think Swinton will get second spot and probably get the home. They'll get a home run at it. And I think
that's a big bold call, that, Jimmy Mack.
It's another 3 wins without North Wales getting a win, really.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I might have to reassess
that.
Yeah,
28 points for and against, 28, 24.
Oh, no, Swinton have got a game in hand. So there'd only be 2 points behind.
Well, they still have to get the wins.
Yeah, no, I'll stick with
North
that.
Wales
I'll stay Swinton.
He's going to
get second,
yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much. This has been a bit of a Championship League One special. Of course, we will focus more on the Championship and League One as we get towards the business end of the season. But thank you to Joe and, of course, Jimmy Mack. And let's see what this weekend brings, because, you've got Batley against Barrow in the Championship. That's another huge game for those positions. Whitehaven, Widnes, Dewsbury, they lose to Featherstone at the weekend. They're down.
Is it?
And that'll be really, really painful for Liam Finn, Sykes, Mark Sawyer, of course. How they sort of readjust in League One. In terms of League One itself, Keighley versus Hunslet, that's the big game of the weekend. Keighley win, they're up. And what an amazing story, to go through the season undefeated, and in the manner in which they've performed as well, putting a lot of points on teams. I know they had to do it tough and come from behind yesterday, but Reece Lovegrove and those Keighley Cougars side, absolutely fantastic.
And that's what Reece has said since the start of the year. So we never talked about winning it, we never talked about promotion. All we talked about was certain records we want to break. Going undefeated was probably one of them. Let's focus on doing this. Focus on the, as he says, focus on the certain things, and the rest will take care of itself.
It's amazing when you look at it, because as I know from covering League One in 2018 when Bradford were in there, he's a very dog-eat-dog, very tough physical division, and to maintain that discipline, have that composure, that resilience, to go through a season undefeated. Watch it, Hunslet will turn it on that.
You never know.
We've put the pundits curse on
well
them.
managed by the club, innit? Everyone involved, Hendo, Reece and others I don't know behind the scenes who have gone about it very sensibly, planning for next year. Great match day experience, big crowds, everything going on, running the club really well, and the team are backing it up on the field. So
yeah,
there'll be a welcome addition to the Championship.
I agree, and the recruitment and how they've set their stall out, they're similar to League going into Super League. Keighley in the Championship, they're not there to make up the numbers. Bradford, Sheffield, Widnes, Batley, beware, Keighley are going to be challenging for those playoff spots next year. Anyway, over and out. Thank you for joining us on this Championship League One review. We'll be back next week.